that it's very important, if you're going to eat meat, you should know what happens to an animal when it's killed and how you feel about it. And for myself personally, it's a moment I shall never forget, and every time I eat bacon I do think of the pig, and I think that it's something everybody needs to know, and the French are very aware of that, and they even brought the school children to the pig killing.
They did. It was in the playground of the school, wasn't it?
Yes. I couldn't believe it when they all turned up.
Yeah, and Maurice was the man who did the killing, who'd killed, 5,000 pigs in his time, and he was an expert, and it was done quite painlessly, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the pig was led from the stable, and by these 6 people, men, all of whom he knew. So he thought he was coming out to have something done, like the vet was going to inject him or something. And they laid him down on the table and stood in front of his face so that he couldn't see what was happening, which was very nice of them, I thought. And he didn't scream or struggle. He just lay down, and I was so nervous, and I was shaking all over. But then when I saw that he was, somehow calm, I felt strong enough to go, and I photographed him and right in the face and watched his eyes and watched his face, and he just gradually became more and more sleepy and then just fainted, really. The whole process of leaving the sty and being dead was 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
And when you think, can you imagine when they go to the slaughterhouse, they're taken in a lorry, and they're so frightened, and people say the adrenaline in their blood, affects the taste. In France, the market, the weekly market, is very, very important, and people can come and sell their products in the market every week. In fact, there's one every day, because each village has a market, so you can go around the markets. And if you sell direct to the public, then you're not involved in this supermarket business of them taking half and forcing you to sell it to them too cheap. And it's really interesting because the local people are really fascinated in food, and they will go all around the market tasting every single saucisson until they get one that suits them. And so then they know that they have to be good, because there's this huge competition going on, the same with the cheese. And people come back every week and buy from the same stall, and they stock up, and that's where they get their food. And that's how the peasants substitute their incomes. These farmers are under threat from the European Union regulations because they're imposing standards of hygiene which are really quite unnecessary under the circumstances. And in my opinion, the whole problem could be resolved with packaging, because if it says on the package, this is an artisan cheese, then you are making your own choice. As long as people know what they're buying, why shouldn't we choose an artisan cheese if we want to? Why should we be forced to have it taken away from us? This is my position. As long as it's labelled and it's there and you know what you're eating, it's your own risk. And if you ask a French person and they say, 200 people died last year from food poisoning, and they say, that's fine, they died for France.
There's another side to this, of course. This was happening in the early morning, in the darkest time of the year, and you were able to record it because by then you were using a digital camera.
Yes, I mean, there are all these pros and cons of the different systems, but the marvellous thing about the digital camera is, as everybody knows probably in this audience, is that you can change the film speed as you go along. So you just have one camera. In the old days, I would have had 3 or 4 around my neck, one for fast film, one for the outside, one for negative, one for colour. And you just have one camera, and you adjust to wherever you are. So in the stable, it's pitch dark, and then as you come out, you change the film speed, and you can just take it through the whole process without ever changing cameras. And I just could not have done those pictures in the old days with the film speed that I had. So it was, huge advantage, and it made me very flexible. I could move around, go inside, come out, do all these things. So I was very happy with and I could also look on the back and see what I was getting.
Yeah.
Because, of course, in the old days, you wouldn't know till you got home whether you got it or not, you know. And that was quite something. It's the difference between knowing where you are creatively and if you're getting what you want to get, and if not, how to improve it. So creatively, I think it's a marvellous tool, a new marvellous tool. It's a new medium.
One of the other things that struck me about watching you work was that there are many of the gifts of a photographer are under the line, as it were. Is that the right expression? They're not to do with technique or knowledge of cameras and films. They're to do with knowledge of people.
Yeah.
And the best example I can think of is when you got word from Marie-Jeanne Sass that a certain farmer and his wife would be willing to be photographed. And we went to their house, their farm, one Sunday morning, and he had changed his mind. You know, he didn't want to be photographed. And you said, well, let's just do a portrait at the gate. And he sort of said, well, that's okay. And by the end of about a quarter of an hour, you were inside the kitchen. Was it to do with him not wanting his wife to be photographed?
Yes, I think it was. And I sort of intuitively felt a little bit of flattery would help the situation. So I said, what a fascinating looking man he was, and could I do his portrait near the gate? And then I admired the barn and said, would he mind standing inside his wonderful barn? And by the time he was quite easily bored, actually. So by the time I'd taken his portrait and flattered him enough, we sort of got ourselves towards the kitchen. And there, inside the kitchen, they had laid out on an old metal bedstead an entire crop of mushrooms, seps they're called, or Boletus edulis, which are the most delicious dried mushrooms there are, really. It was a fantastic year for them that year, and they had them drying all over the farm, in the house, on the yard, in the barn, everywhere. And so we got the pictures.
I've always thought that an essential ingredient of a good curator is low cunning, and it turns out that this is essential for photographers as well.
I found being a woman photographer quite an advantage, really, because the French peasant is a very frugal creature, and they are very self-sufficient, and they love to make everything they need and grow all the food they need, and they hate to spend money. And they're always worried, if you turn up as a photographer, that you're going to make them pay for something, buy a print, or it's going to cost them some money. And with me, they just thought I was, a woman with a pretty hobby. It wasn't just about that. Also, I think using this big camera was a great help, because there's an expression in photography, I'm going to shoot pictures. And it is quite aggressive when you use 35mm cameras with big lenses and so on. But with a plate camera, they call it a sitting. And you sit there, and they sit there, and it all takes a long time. You put your dark cloth over your head, and it's very calm. Actually, because I was commissioned by the town hall to do this show, they could see that it was not for personal profit, it was for the community.
So timing's important too, obviously.
Yes. Do you remember the time when we were photographing Pierre Pizot, and we heard this commotion inside the house, and he was standing at the door with this great cabbage he was going to give us, but I knew that something was going to happen, so I focused up on the door and had my hand on the button, and sure enough, his dog came rushing out with a kitten half dead in its mouth, and this was the most amazing, powerful picture. And I got it absolutely at the right moment. I waited, and I had a sort of, guts, if you like, to wait for the moment and then get my one shot. And that is something, you have to have nerves of steel, and you have to have very good timing. And that's quite an art which you learn over a period of time, I think.
Yes, I remember Monsieur Pizot saying, oh, he's only playing with it. Gerbe de mariage. And how do they use them in that ceremony?
Well, what happens is this sheaf of corn, which is very high, as you can see, it's like 6 foot high, is laid flat on the ground, set fire to, and the young couple have to jump over it before they can leave her village and join the new village. And people say it's to do with shaking off the evil spirits which might follow her. She is collecting chestnuts for chestnut jam, and it's a big crop up there, and when they lost the silk industry, they used to make silk up there, and peasants used to grow the silkworms for the industry, but it died out and had to be
Japanese imports,
yes,
paid to that.
So they substituted it with chestnuts, which they now have in profusion. And another subject which is rather beautiful is the bread. We've got a whole row of pictures in the exhibition of bread, and they are wonderful bakers. And I particularly love this one, which is called a marguerite. It's like a daisy, and they're very poor people, and so when they have festivals they have to make the best of it. They have these long tables, and they make a huge cauldron of cabbage soup, which is a favourite of everybody. And on the table are these big pieces of bread, and you tear off a petal. Each person takes a petal and has it with their soup. And that makes it festive. And we put that first as well, because it was a sort of texture of the place somehow. The ladders and
everything worn and weathered, used.
And then we had these various subjects which we wanted to show. So we started out actually with the horses, which is, I personally think, is a very fascinating subject. And I know that Americans have a lot to do with horses and a lot of time for them.
Here's
another one, And then we decided to do something on bread. So here is our lovely Madame Odette with her bread.
Oh, and there's a nice is it a sort of pasty?
Yes, Well, actually, it's filled with, yes, it is a sort of pasty. And then that's the one we were just talking about, the marguerite. And this is very sweet.
Love it. Yes.
Just to prove that not everybody is 75 years old.
Yeah.
And
gorgeous little face.
So we started with that we start with that in the show. And then this one. It shows the landscape, where we are. It sort of places us in the landscape.
Yes, far away, high up, very cold, very exposed. That's what this place is. The silhouettes became more distinct. Some men and animals, a score of cattle, 2 goats. Lower down, near the table, the locals shiver at the sight of this surrender. Already the village of Plot is empty. Next year the farm Seuil will be, and soon perhaps Bastide. A strange time when a world disappears, that of the high farms. Did it ever exist? Why are we here then? We're mistaken. It's a mirage, a dream in black and white. The ones who are leaving raise their glasses to their neighbours, who say nothing more. A lorry is there. No one had seen it. Loading must be done. Only the bellowing of the cattle disturbs this unusual encounter. The 2 fin gras beef cows, already assigned to a butcher in Saint-Agrève, climb into a cattle truck. Adieu.